Weirdo, take one. I have become more and more detached from reality. And as I do, my visions become clearer. On the back of my eyes, I have stared into the void, and I've seen the crowd of eyes, the image of our world projected onto a pale screen. In the distance, I can see the barrier separating this false world from the real one. I touch it, but I am not ready. I still fear it. The dreamer has said that we will use the orb to enact vengeance against the ancient ones. Will they know of it? All things require risk. I need a femboy with big mommy milkers and a big Tonka truck booty.
Last time on Dead Frontier 2 Analysis, we tackled contemporary queer feminism, and why Marx was right. But this time, we're covering the newly added story to the game. Who is the stalker? What is the secret behind Secronom? Does Admin Pone have mommy issues? Is the city of Palehaven actually a simulation manufactured by a death cult? All that and more will be answered, but first, a message from our sponsors.
I am Eddie Scott, and I was just a normal person until that day.
Raid Shadow Legends.
Ah yes. Dead Frontier 2. A game made by one guy. Sucked bad on release. Got review bombed. And so he converted it into an action game with an ammo economy built on the toil of an underclass of third-world peasants because his fans have an attention span of 2 seconds. And now it has a story. Sort of. In DF2, the story can be discovered by looting various items, and reading and listening to them for information. Of course most people probably just ignore the story, as it's hard to understand what is happening when you're given seemingly random information so sparsely in between long bouts of gameplay, and the writing and voice acting is a bit mediocre, and most wouldn't think it's a good idea to stop in the middle of a dangerous world and read a book and there's no UI to organize these items, so trying to remember which ones you've read or listened to already. This is not a review of Dead Frontier 2. I've already done that. Most of the core issues still haven't been addressed, and the game is dying, and so I'm sorry if I seem a little bitter. I'm upset about that, because as a big fan of what this game could have been, who has invested a lot in it, I don't want it to die. Taking a look at the wall graffiti, the event clues, lootable documents, and voice tapes, I think I have discerned the timeline of events. In July 2, 1948, a mysterious object is sighted in the sky. Nearby residents start to have minor maladies. A young boy, Jeffrey Comer, is said to have seen the mysterious object crash nearby. He seems emotionally distraught and hasn't been able to sleep. It puts visions in my head, he cries. That's not really what this character looks like, but the game includes no images for the characters, and it's easier to follow the story if you can put a face to the names. Also hi, this is what my soul looks like. Nice to meet you. 13 years later, on January 13, 1961, the resident psychologist at Kesey Hospital reports that patient Jeffrey Comer is a particularly disturbed patient. He may improve during the day, but wakes up unchanged. He screams through the night, complains of nightmares during waking hours. Refuses to let others speak, instead giving cryptic warnings based on his visions. He took an orderly hostage to be allowed to speak to everyone, ended up stabbing her multiple times, but she lived. The psychologist recommends immediate action to protect the patient from himself, and to protect others. In his personal writings, Jeffrey Comer describes how his dreams have begun to feel more real than the real world, that he has the same dream every night during his restless nights, visions of a foreboding future where humanity has ended, as prophesied by what he calls the ancients. He encounters a barrier which he describes as being between the real world and the other side. He reaches out to it, but awakens. He concludes the nightmare ends, but it's not forgotten. Later he writes that he is no longer dreaming. It is the so-called real world which feels like a dream. He inhabits the waking world, but is no longer of it. He feels he is losing grip with reality, and the more he does, the greater his visions become. This time in his vision, he reached out to touch the barrier between the real world and the other side, but feels a pain, and concludes that he is unworthy of going to the other side, as there is more to learn. It must be a message from the ancients. He describes some kind of flickering light in the distance while the dead rise and march. He again concludes, the nightmare ends, but it's not forgotten. Comer no longer believes in the real world. The visions grow more vivid. He ventures closer to the flickering light and finally sees what it is. Our world, played out on a pale screen. Such images are described as deception, a lure to ensnare us all. He concludes that to see what lies behind the lure would drive someone mad. But not him, as he is the chosen one of the ancients. He concludes the nightmare is, and ever shall be. 7 years later, on September 13, 1968, Dr. Jonathan Langstrom announces to the Kesey Medical Board that Jeffrey Comer is cured. He claims Comer was suffering insomnia, delusions, and crippling paranoia, and they tried shock therapy, which only made him worse, but that the introduction of a new therapist, and modern drugs, cured him. He says in the past 6 months Comer exhibited only one brief psychotic episode. 2 years later, on October 2, 1970, Jeffrey Comer writes in a private diary that he feels rejected by society, treated with hate and disgust. No one will help him. He thinks they reject him because he has seen a truth they haven't. He feels very victimized and unheard. Since this world will not accept him, he reasons he shall try to get into the next world, where he imagines he will be accepted. He will take revenge on this world by making his dreams become reality, somehow. He has a vision of his future sons, stalkers maybe, after the nightmare, which renews his faith in his path. 7 years later, on December 1977, a pharmaceutical company named Secronom begins trying to buy land in some townships from the government. Less than a year later in June 1978, the government accepts. There are some minor protests from local residents, but local residents are also hurting for economic opportunities, since the local coal mine shut down. Citing state regulations, Secronom calls for a merging of the local townships under the name Palehaven. It is said Secronom will help develop local infrastructure and become an involved part in town life, offering first treatment to local citizens. At some point in the 80s, a branch of an accounting firm named Comer & Sons was opened up in Palehaven. Mysterious arson attacks happen, and Comer & Sons employees offer to fill in for those injured in the fires. Around May 29, 2001, Mara Nix, head of Secronom, has her first child, and names them August. Over the years she will neglect her child due to the nature of her job. At some point a man named Adam Solvana is inducted into a cult, the Cult of Nightmares, which is run by Jeffrey Comer, or as he calls himself, the Dreamer. It recruits those who work tirelessly to show people what is really happening in the world, but who have been ignored and hated. This is the nightmare of all humanity, which will continue forever unless they put a stop to it. At some point a religious document is composed, titled, The Prophecy, detailing the beliefs of the cult. They believe that this world is not the real world, and that the next world must be brought about through purposeful fulfillment. It lays out predictions for how this will look, that, while cryptic, sort of vaguely line up with the events of what happens. At some point Comer & Sons took over accounting for Secronom. In 2009, Secronom releases the N3 variant virus, a medical virus that is claimed to have healing properties, targeting bad cells, and eliminating the need to take flu shots, among other things. The release goes well. Research on the next variant, the N4, which is said to be able to cure cancer, begins. Head of Secronom, Mara Nix, becomes aware that her child August has brain cancer. She illegally skims corporation money to help them. 4 years later, on September 1, 2013, Jeffrey Comer threatens to reveal this illegal economic activity, unless Mara hires some of his, quote-unquote, nephews, to work at Secronom. She accepts. Around this time, cult member Adam Solvana describes being involved in charitable events raising money for medical research, and various meditations on the truth. He was rejected by the Dreamer, because, as he said, "You still fear it." As in, what needs to be done to bring about the next world, and so Adam decided to do whatever it took to become his most devoted follower. 3 years later, on January 4, 2016, Richard Adler, head researcher in charge of research on the new N4 virus variant, reports that the project is going well, but that various employees seem to be acting secretively, and that he suspects some of the pharmacology reports are being doctored. He warns his staff against such practices, and assures everything regarding the project will have to go through him from now on. On January 20, 2016, Mara Nix writes a letter to August, lamenting the stresses of life that came between them. In it she reveals that August's cancer has returned, but she had been hiding it from them, so they could be a normal teenager. She wishes they can put aside the bad blood and spend this last time together. She never sent the letter. 2 weeks later, on February 2, 2016, Mara Nix is interviewed on the news. She explains how the virus works to attack unhealthy entities in the body, unlike a normal virus. She confirms that it cures cancer, and claims the N4 will be available by the end of the year. By the end of the month, Mara Nix is looking to move the N4 virus to human trials. Mara Nix is doing this to save August from their cancer. She worries about it going wrong, but is blinded by a fear of losing them. On the final day of the month, Richard Adler confronts Mara Nix about the rushed human trials. Mara claims she did this due to anxious investors. Richard accuses her of doing this for personal reasons, for August. She tells him he has 2 months to get the virus ready for human trials, and threatens his career if he steps out of line again. On March 31, 2016, a local newspaper reports on wildfires threatening a local nuclear power plant. It is said the local power plant is accused of dumping waste in the river. Perhaps this explains the radioactive zombies, or the mutations. Who knows? On April 18, 2016, a few of the N4 researchers write, imploring Richard Adler to stop the human trials, due to an anomalous but worrying case of a test rat that became strong, aggressive and self-destructive. On April 30, 2016, Richard Adler writes a report stressing the need to overcome unintended side effects in the N4 virus, in particular the depression and lack of appetite. He speculates that the issues are caused by the virus rewriting cells, before they can properly communicate information signals in the body. During this time, infiltrators into Secronom, from the Cult of Nightmares, were sabotaging the N4 virus research from within, and attempting to use it for their own purposes. They used the anomalous mutated rat as their model, and since it was only one rat, Richard ignored it and is allowing the virus to go forward to human trials. On May 7, 2016, the first human patient receives N4. This is August, also perhaps known as Patient 0. On May 22, 2016, Richard Adler is lamenting that the human trials went exactly as the anomalous rat. They have had to lock up and contain the trial participants, and apparently, August, was taken home to their mother's personal cage. He regrets allowing Mara to pressure him. He says the patients seem barely human anymore, and yet the work continues. It is said the outbreak started in a Secronom facility in France. That public outcry caused the government to raid Secronom and release the captive test subjects. Sometime after this, the virus spread quickly around the planet. Governments are said to be deeply unequipped to handle the problem, refusing to deploy military against their own citizens, and resigning themselves to the inevitable. By July 1, 2016, 50 million people worldwide have the virus. The true state of the world after this is not well known. Most of the perspectives that come from now on are of local, on-the-ground perspectives, of residents and survivors in Palehaven. Sometime after this, Jeffrey Comer finds his cult member, Adam Solvana, as a zombie, captures him somehow, and infuses him with his own blood and flesh to create a new kind of creature, a stalker. The first of its kind. In the game, stalkers are creatures which appear randomly and follow you around for a long time until you reach a place of safety. He gives a speech to his cult, addressing them as his sons. Perhaps they have similarly been turned into stalkers, or maybe the bosses from the game, not sure. He asks them to find him a mysterious silver orb, probably the object sighted so long ago, so that he might enact the next part of his plan. He promises great things in the world beyond, if they help him with this. On August 26, 2016, a council representing some kind of group of survivors, probably in Palehaven, are discussing what to do about people missing from their recent scouting parties, and about strange lights beyond the ridge, cameras and coded messages. One of them, Hal, is certain they're being watched by someone he calls the Watchers. The people there are too afraid, and established, to take any further risks to investigate. On October 3, 2016, Hal leaves on his own to try to figure out what is happening. He later found a mysterious creature, that he identifies as the one that had been watching them. He describes it as an eye in shape and being, as having deadly tendrils, a brutal thing that kills both infected and survivors, but for some reason shows no interest in him. That is, until he investigated too closely and was disappeared. This may have been the first one, Patient Zero, what remained of August after his infection with the N4 virus. The one who is said, in the prophecy, to be the eye who watches over the cult. In October 2016, we have potentially one of the first stalker sightings. At some point Jeffrey Comer gives a speech to the stalkers who appear to have found the silver orb, and brought it to him. He says this is a tool that can allow him to shape the world in his own image. He figured out that it emits a signal. He wonders if he can use it to strike a blow against the ancients. He suggests that this sphere may help him have better control over his sons, his undead legions. He speculates it may also have an effect on the living too. He also says he may be able to use it to strike a blow against the first one itself. I don't really get that one. We shall perfect this flawed world. In another speech, he claims to have finally finished a signal beacon, which he claims will only get more powerful over time. He claims it will cause his sons, and the zombies, to grow stronger, and the ancients will meet us as equals. He said he is no longer afraid of the ancients, and he shall make them rue the visions they sent him long ago. With this device, he claims he will be in charge of the masses in the street, and will answer to no one else, achieving true freedom. He will leave behind this gift to the people who come next. He says the world is theirs to inherit. This is what we want, he says, possibly referring to the cult, not sure. He concludes, then, and only then, when there is nothing left for you to conquer, the nightmare will finally end. On May 22, 2018, officers holding out at Greywood Station notice a subtle signal being broadcast on all radio frequencies. They speculate that it may be drawing people or zombies nearby. On July 3, 2018, two survivors find a silver sphere on some kind of scouting mission. They were looking for something that was emitting a signal, and take the sphere. Something, likely a stalker, interrupts their attempts to understand it. One survivor left behind undated notebooks expressing a strange feeling about Palehaven. They arrived in Palehaven 6 days ago, and feel an odd sense of déjà vu, as if perhaps this has all happened before. They feel as if they were strangely drawn to this place. They describe a dream they had before the outbreak, a vision of a twisted office building, sort of like the one they are in now. They speculate that the town of Palehaven called to them in that dream. She says she spoke with other survivors who have similar experiences. It is becoming clear to many that Palehaven brought them here. Another survivor is bored and interviews other survivors to try to figure out what is going on. One person points out that it's always dark here in Palehaven, and speculates about there being a possible nuclear winter. One person says the town is just a bad dream, and we'll all wake up to our normal lives soon. One blames corporations, speculating that this town is like a reality show put on by the media, like The Truman Show. They speculate that this might be the source of the weird signals people are worked up about. Some survivors say that this situation is punishment for humanity's moral irresponsibilities. One speculates that we will be rewarded for performing well through this difficult time. One survivor speculates that they have made a deal with the Middle East and China, who will invade any day now and get rid of the zombies, and everyone will be so grateful they'll submit to the commie crap. Their friend in the military claims the whole world is done for, and Palehaven is the only place left holding on. I may have missed a few things, but yeah. And that's me, making the story look a bit better than it is. Summarizing cringy dialogue into its essential elements, attempting to decipher an otherwise unfocused writing style. Seems like a random mishmash of Lovecraft, Resident Evil and Dead Space. So what don't we know still? Who are the ancients? Are they real somehow? Or just something imagined by Comer and the cult? Were Jeffrey's visions a product of the shock treatment he endured? What is the origin and nature of the Silver Orb? What is the true state of the world outside of Palehaven? Should we trust any of these documents to reveal the actual truth? How is Jeffrey Comer so good at everything? Accounting, capturing vicious zombies, pharmaceutical biology, camera security, bribing, manipulating the masses? He's a bit of a Mary Sue, ain't he? If Jeffrey is just some crazy guy, then why is he sort of right about so many things? Why is the religious prophecy largely true? Why do all the bad guys sound like two-dimensional cartoonish villains? Why would anyone join such a nonsensical cult? The cult writing, their motivations are incoherent. They struggle to justify their actions in any way beyond being cult people. I mean, just listen to this recording of Adam Solvana.
I can remember it like it was yesterday. The day I, Adam Solvana, was invited into the fold. I was so frightened back then, but that was only because I had not yet learned the truth. This world, the one we live in right now, is not the true world. We cannot see the real world yet, but we will soon. The dreamer has foretold its coming. The cult of nightmares was what the man at the bar had called it. I nearly spat my drink out. From a young age, I was told that cults were evil, wretched things. Anyone who would join one was a fool, or worse, an agent of the devil. I told this to the man, expecting him to get angry, but he simply gave me a patient smile. He'd heard it all before. Then he told me a story. It was a tale of struggle and strife, of a man who had worked tirelessly to open people's eyes, to get them to see what was really happening in the world. It was an old song, and a tragic one, for you see, no one had listened to that man. No one would ever hear his words. And eventually he would die, broken and alone. Then something strange happened. I reached up to my eyes and found them to be wet with tears. I knew this story well, for it was my own. I told the man so, and he nodded. It was his story too. This was the nightmare of all humanity, a nightmare that would continue into eternity unless we came together and put a stop to it. How? I asked. There is a man who can do this thing, he answered. He is the one they call the Dreamer. Would you like to meet him? I said yes.
Now you see the terrible voice acting and writing I had to navigate to put this timeline together for you. Are we to believe that the mysterious object that fell all that time ago affected more than just Comer? Have many people gone through what Comer did? Is the story of the cult, the developer Neil's idea of what communists are? Crazy people, who feel persecuted, and want to bring about the next world through destruction? What are the stalkers doing, now that they found the orb? Why do they chase the players? Where is Jeffrey operating out of? Is he dead now? Is that what that dialogue about leaving the world to others was about? Why is he against the ancients now? Why did he mention striking against the first one? What does that even mean? I thought August was the first one. What is Patient Zero, and what is its significance? I don't think we've ever seen it in game. Obviously there's the typical problem of demonizing the mentally ill. I don't know how quite to address this. I feel that to build yet another narrative, around the mythic evil of a psychologically disturbed individual, plays into the existing prejudice towards mentally ill people, that causes people to fear, neglect and mistreat mentally ill people in real life. Despite what many may think, mentally ill people are more likely to be mistreated, or to mistreat themselves, than to mistreat others. There is perhaps a distinctly cynical view of humanity present in this story, where each advance of corporate monopoly and medical malpractice was largely unopposed by the ignorant and permissive public. Absent from the story is any description of the opposition of state violence to any resistance. There's a lot of cynicism about government in the story that I share too, such as the government granting a corporation monopoly on a town, police releasing infected test subjects, and being unwilling or unable to handle the spread of the virus. Does Admin Pone have an estranged wife? Problems with women? I mean, just listen to this.
What's the occasion?
You know why I'm here, Mara.
The investors were getting anxious. I had to give them something, and the N4 is coming along nicely, practically ready for trials, really.
That's not how these things work. You know it, and I know it, so let's cut the crap. This isn't the first time you forced us to cut corners.
And look at how many more lives we've saved because of that. How many people still have their family members because of our expedited production schedule? Huh? How many, Richard?
I can't argue with your results, but...
Besides, I have nothing but the utmost confidence in your team. You will crack this thing and...
It's August, isn't it?
What?
I saw the results the last time I was up here. I'm sorry, Mara. I really am, but he's not going to make it if we don't get this thing right. You know that, don't you? All of this, the moral and medical consequences of your actions, you aren't thinking straight.
2 months.
What?
You have 2 more months to get the virus ready for human trials. After that, we are proceeding regardless of your professional opinion.
Mara!
No, this is not a debate. I'll say this one time, and one time only. You will continue to serve as project head on the N4 project. You will heed my directions, and you will never question my authority again. If you do not, I will run your reputation into the ground and ensure that you never work in medicine again. Are we clear?
I don't know what to say.
Then don't say anything. I'll go break the news to your team for you. And Richard?
Yes?
If you ever mention his name again, I'll have your head.
The character Mara Nix is a poorly written archetype of a shitty dysfunctional power-tripping woman. Neil, are you okay, mate? So what is the moral of the story? Don't let crazy people near your sensitive corporate project? When I started reading about Comer's visions, I thought for a moment that I might get a story that carried such themes throughout. Instead I got a jumbled mess. When I was reading about how Comer felt rejected by society after being released from the psychiatric ward, for a second, I thought maybe the story would go in a kind, compassionate direction, that maybe it might explore the real problem of long-term mental health care patients struggling to restart a life after release, but instead it focused mainly on a persecution complex based on him being the chosen one. When I started reading about the corrupt corporate monopoly town, I thought it'd end in a lesson about out-of-control state capitalism, but in the end, all of that felt kind of incidental to the real problem, of evil individuals, sneaking their way in, and mucking up an otherwise successful project. When I saw themes of a corrupt society that could allow such events to happen, I was searching for a critique of that society, but found mostly a story about individuals making bad choices due to their flawed characters. When I heard characters speculating that the game world wasn't real in some way, I expected a bigger twist that never came. You can play all the way through Dead Frontier 2 without paying this story any mind. The story of DF2 reflects the game it's attached to. To most players, especially on release, the game was bland, generic, repetitive, and unmemorable. I love that someone went out of their way to create a world where I can be a survivor in a zombie-infested city. I love being able to create a character that reflects me, that plays like me. I love being a powerless person in a miserable, overwhelming situation. I love feeling that powerlessness fade as I grow and progress in the game. I love...
Everything is going according to plan. 2 major bread tubers have been taken out by cancel culture. Whatever that means. And the strongest among them is still making videos about DF2 from behind her shadow ban. Nothing can stop our plan of maintaining the stupidest imaginable society because we personally benefit from it.
Don't underestimate them. If the strongest one manages to recruit Neil Admin from Dingaloid Future 2, there's no telling what they'd be capable of. Imagine a zombie mmorpg where players work together to build a better world, instead of competing amongst each other over peanut butter prices.
There's no way that's possible.
You have grown too complacent, my brother.
Then you'd have a game world that wouldn't be a static forever market, but a server in which some X amount of progress could be made, but eventually, the players would make all the progress and perfect the world, so they'd want to destroy it and start over again.
Precisely. That is the limitation of such a game, but you forget one thing. Those who play such a game will be transformed into followers of Anita Sarkeesian, and never shut up about gender essentialism. I read it on Gamergate.com.
If that is true, then...
Sir, Valium has already converted all the remaining 500 dead Frontier 2 fans. They've formed a guerrilla army and are holding 15 cities hostage, sir.
If only we hadn't doubted the Red-Brown Alliance.